I'd like to welcome you to the Unmasked Relationship Factor Series. I am AliNICOLE WOW, also known as Majesty, and most of you are used to me being in my masked Majesty mode. But for this series, I've been unmasked, and I am joined by one of my celebrity-preneurs, who is also one of our relationship empowerment coaches, Brenda Lynn, and I'm super excited to have her here with me because we're going to have an amazing discussion. As most of you know who follow the series, there's never really a planned agenda in terms of what we're going to talk about, but the overall arching goal is to unmask certain relationship dynamics. And so we're going to see what comes up in conversation today and how we can share some empowerment and sometimes be candid if need be. So we'll see what comes up. Brenda Lynn, thank you for joining me today.
You are so welcome. Always enjoy these.
I am really glad to have you, especially in this type of setting here, so we can have it's a really flowing discussion as it relates to the relationship dynamics. And we know that those dynamics, they vary because we have the family dynamics, we have couples dynamics, we have work-related dynamics, and you and I both focus a lot on the self-relationship, aspect as being really the core basis for where we spring forth from so that other relationships can really be harmonious. So is there anything before we get started that you would like to open up with as it relates to this topic?
The one thing that I will add to what you said there is even within each of those relationships, they are dynamic. They change continually as people grow and expand and change. Change is just a given now. And it's rapid. It's accelerating all the time. And as people grow, the relationships change.
They do. Yeah. And that's why it's important for individuals to really evolve together. I've done some segment on the topic of relationships or couples that evolve together, stay together, versus just the concept of families that pray together, stay together. There's concept around that. Like, it takes more than just prayer and the spirituality aspect if we're not including the soul's evolution aspect as it relates to relationships and people evolving and growing together. That happens whether it's work related, whether it's marriages, the dating dynamics, family dynamics. People's
parent-child, absolutely
right. You can
it's always changing, and that's why it's so critical for people to build the awareness around what's happening in the relationships, build conversation skills, build empathy, the skills around empathy, around curiosity, all of those things. The conversations that happen between people is what builds and maintains those relationships.
Absolutely. And even the conversations, the communications have to continue to evolve, right? Just like we think about love languages and just those different, those different dynamics, there has to be the progression of, of these types of functionalities, if you will. And I believe that this is one of those areas that really needs to be unmasked even more, because people hear about the communication dynamics, but not necessarily understanding that there are different levels and layers.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's the relationships and conversation skills are just such a critical piece of our life on
Vital,
every level.
cornerstones.
And yet nobody ever bothers to teach us at any age how to have proper conversations, how to approach other people, how to build relationships. They just assume that as human beings, we come in knowing how to do that. And that, as we've seen, as our society breaks down, people don't know how to do that.
No, they don't. And that goes, back to what I was saying in terms of the evolution, and the whole thing around this should be kind of an innate functionality or ability that we have. It's like, no, it's like a seed that gets planted in the ground. It has to be nurtured and cultivated in order for it to grow. Things have to be developed. So yes, there are the fundamentals around communication and conversation. We know how to talk and understand the basic things, but when it comes to the human relationship dynamics, that has to really be cultivated. That really has to be
Absolutely.
something that's developed for sure.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it starts with, as we've said, it starts with ourselves, that building that relationship with ourselves, the self-talk, the conversations that we hold within ourselves, but also working on ourselves to develop the skills so that we are approaching it with emotional intelligence, with resilience, that we can, as those relationships change, we can just naturally, our conversation will just naturally segue into the new,
into the
new realm.
Perfect.
When you have those foundational skills, then you can go with the flow.
Right. That is absolutely true. So let's talk about kind of more of the breakdown, because as we're setting this up here, and I love this, especially if this is where it's going to go, which it could go in so many different, different ways, areas.
That's what's so much fun about these.
Yes, it just be.
You and I don't even know where this is going to go.
No, we don't. Just be in the moment and allow it to organically flow. Because again, there's so many different layers and levels to various topics. And so I was mentioning about, let's talk a little bit about the breakdown, because we've set a nice foundation in terms of the importance and the criticalness as it relates to communication and the conversations evolving. So the things that keep it from evolving and the growth happening. So let's talk a little bit about that. What do you think prevents, I mean, there's a lack of knowledge. We brought that up, the lack of awareness around how to do it. But just from a fundamental basis, what do you think are the things that really need to be unmasked that keep conversations and communication from evolving?
I think that there's certain habits that people, unconscious habits that people have in their conversation styles. And studies have indicated that this is about 90% of the energy put into conversations. And that is that we enter conversations with the intention of convincing the other person of our beliefs, of our position in that. I think that that's one really big thing, is that we, most of those conversations are dedicated to trying to teach, convert, heal, fix, or direct people. And that will automatically sabotage a relationship. We see that time and time again, that actually breaks bonds instead of building them. The other thing is when people approach those relationships in judgment instead of curiosity. And again, that comes back to, I'm right and you're wrong. And, you're an idiot for thinking the way that you're thinking. So you need to think my way. And so we really see that a lot in conversations in every realm. I see it throughout corporate. I see it with parenting skills. It's just that people don't have the awareness. Nobody's ever taught them the impact of doing it that way, or how much you can expand those relationships when you just shift those habits slightly.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just stated. So let's do some awareness expansion. Let's expand the awareness and possibly bring into this dynamics some now and next level comprehension, so that people know how to start moving forward. And when we want them to be empowered from within, and not so much of us directing them, but being the triggers for them, being those prompts. You know how I am about prompts and triggers, journal prompts and triggers, is being the prompt that evokes and stimulates them at a deeper level, so that they actually can really get their own inner wisdom. So how does that sound? Do we want to do some?
Sounds good to me.
Some prompting and and everything is that. So you were talking, in terms of going back to what you said earlier about the lack of learning about these different things. And a lot of times it's that even the professionals that are teaching, even they lack the evolution of what needs to take place. And so that partially is why we see so many different breakdowns within relationships, because people will say, well, actually, I've been doing the work. I've read such and such book about this. I've taken this relationship course and tried to improve myself. And it seems like things, still aren't happening. So do I need to shift circles, not be so much with particular family members? How do I bring some resolution to a situation like that? So do you have anything around that you'd like to expand the awareness?
Absolutely. I think that all relationships are built on the foundation of the conversations that we have within those. And conversations are two-sided. They're
Right.
talking and they're listening. And most often people will talk, but they don't know how to listen effectively.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What we work on with people is a couple of things. Number one, before you start giving advice or telling people about your position, ask permission to do that.
Right.
Just simply say, hey, AliNICOLE, I got a thought. Can I share that with you?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens when you do that is the other person, it's very unusual. They're not used to being asked permission.
Right.
It makes them feel very honored and included within the conversation. It actually levels out the power dynamics within that relationship. So if you're chatting with a child or with a subordinate at work and you say, hey, can I offer you some advice? Instead of saying, here's how you should do it.
Right. Right.
It levels out the power dynamics. It makes them feel very honored in that. And when you do that, they actually, when they have to answer, yes, sure, go ahead,
Mm-hmm.
they are ready to listen to you. They
Right.
actually listen. And most often they will follow the advice that you give, which is very different than if you just offered the advice. The natural human reaction is to say, screw that, I'll do it my own way.
Rebel, yes.
The exact opposite of what you just told me to do, because I'll show you. It's just natural. We see that all the time. So just simple things like asking permission before you go ahead, asking open questions instead of closed questions. So closed questions being those that can be answered with one word, a yes, a no, or a grunt, or a, just a one-word answer. When you ask a proper open question, people have to engage you in conversation with you.
Right.
Unless they're a teenager. My son as a teenager could grunt his way through anything when he was a teenager, but they have to actually put some thought into the answer.
Right.
So if for an example of this is saying, how was your day at work? Can be answered with a fine or good. If you say, what was the most exciting thing that happened to you at work today? Now they've got to think about that, and they've got to answer.
Right.
And you learn so much more from that person. Now the relationship has just been elevated to a different level. Just
the engagement has been expanded in terms of and
you've learned, when they answer that question, you've learned something about them. Now you know an element of them that you wouldn't have known with a closed question, or if you didn't ask a question at all.
Right.
So,
yeah. That's great. Yes, love that. And something that you brought up in terms of the honor, which is very important, because also too, when people learn to honor themselves, then they can be more honorable in situations and not be so self-focused, not so self-absorbed, and then be able to incorporate what you were mentioning before in terms of empathy and also too, being really present. And I think that's very important, is being present. Something else I want to interject in terms of the different levels of communication and the conversation is also the nonverbal aspects, the body communication and the body language, because that speaks volumes too.
Just 80% of your communication is that.
Absolutely, right.
Very big.
Whether the person's interested or even being there, you can tell within their dynamics of how their body language is. This is even in business and sales, all of these things. The body language and that nonverbal communication, it really broadcasts volume, sometimes even louder than words.
Absolutely. And in one of our courses, we teach people to read those micro expressions. And that's facial expression. You know, what are they doing with their eyebrows, with their eyes, with their mouth?
Right.
You know, which direction are their feet pointing? Which, you know, there's just all of these signs that you can pick up to know. And if you're really aware of that, and you see a signal that says, hey, they're drifting away, they're disengaged, you can pivot your conversation to bring them back into alignment. You can ask them an open question to, you know, engage them if you see them drifting off and things like that. But just that awareness.
Yes.
And that full participation.
That full participation. I love how you said that, because the full participation goes back to that being present. Because in order to participate fully, you have to be present.
Yeah. If you're going to ask a question, you better be present to listen to the answer.
Right.
Or you've just defeated the whole purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Most people will listen to figure out where they can interject. They don't listen to learn and then pause. There's nothing wrong with pausing in a conversation. Like listening to what, you know, I would ask you a question, listen to what you had to say. Then I'd pause while I formulated my next question or my comment to that. And it's extremely powerful because they feel like you're present, and then they feel like they have to move up to that level and they have to be present. Right.
And in those dynamics, it's not like being on the radio on air. I have you know, background in that, and you know, we're trained that the silence is a cardinal sin. When you're on the radio, when you're on air. You know?
Right. The dead air.
Dead air is like that's a cardinal sin. But when we're in communication and there's not like a time limit or so that you have to be able to articulate something in, there needs to be just that flow and the ability to have that powerful pause, so that it does, that's even part of the engagement too.
Oh, it absolutely is. And we have another skill that we teach in the courses is the wait technique. And we have that as I think that a lot of people have heard that as, why am I talking? But what we take it one level before that, what am I thinking? And then why am I talking? And the third one that we have is, what am I triggered by? Because often you'll be in a conversation, somebody will say something, it'll trigger an emotional response that has nothing to do with the conversation. It'll hijack your focus, and often you will react rather than, which often is inappropriate, rather than responding appropriately to that conversation. So when you can just pause, take that deep breath and think about what you're going to say next, conversations go brilliantly. Yes, they do. They do. I'm pausing right now, just in there. Take it all in. Hey? It's such a powerful conversation skills are just so powerful. They are building relationships. They are. And the more that they are enhanced and evolved, the more empowering they become for relationships to be not only sustainable, but just go to the next level of thriving and have a thriving relationship. Because we know that there are some relationship dynamics where it is survival mode, and everybody's just trying to kind of live another day to make it through without drama or without dynamics. But how do you move into the harmonious phases of having thriving, connected relationships? And that communication factor, that is, as you mentioned, that's critical. That is definitely the chief cornerstone in terms of how you continue to build and to elevate. Because once those dynamics break down, you can forget it. Because a house without a solid foundation just will not stand. So absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. No, and these relationships and therefore conversations will impact every realm of your life. Absolutely. Like you brought up sales. Like you're not I spent 20 plus years as a corporate executive, and the most successful people in my companies, the highest paid people in my companies, were the ones that knew how to build relationships. They were our salespeople that really nailed that skill of empathy, of listening to their clients, of really making their clients feel valuable. And their sales skyrocketed. They made far more than any of the executives in the company because they knew how to build those relationships. And it goes right down into, you know, how you take these exact same skills and you use them with your kids. It's amazing to watch my youngest daughter with her, you know, two-year-old, but now she's 4. But just how she talks her through any kind of tantrum or breakdown. She doesn't scold, she doesn't jump into judgment. She really remains in that place of curiosity. And, you know, she'll say, "Hey, Naya, what's going on with you? You know, what do you think made you feel so upset?" And I've never seen I mean, she came through the terrible 2s and the trying 3s and all, you know, she would have her emotional breakdowns, but she never had one of those full out tantrums that lasted for 10 or 20 minutes, you know, like you've seen with a lot of kids. And that little 4-year-old has some of the best conversation skills, the best relationship skills that I've seen, including a lot of the executives that I work with. So it can be learned.
Yes.
They can be very easily. You can, a lot of it's just awareness.
It is. And then moving beyond that, because then as we know, awareness is not enough, but it is a start. And then the expanded awareness then bridges into that now and next level comprehension. You know, what do we need to understand around the awareness that has been illuminated, so to speak? And now what do you do with that to actually start, if we want to call it, building a frame work for the relationship building? And because it all starts there, for sure. And going back to the sales dynamics, I have several formulas for the sales aspect, even as it relates to the communication element. And one of my kind of, if you want to call it a formula, I'll just give 3 of them, where you have to be able to communicate, connect in order to convert. You know, so
absolutely.
Think about that in relationships, and in relationships, in terms of the communication factor, believe it or not, is about, in some regards, persuasion and selling, but not in terms of trying to necessarily convince, like what we were talking about before, to get the person to do what you want. It is just sometimes in being understood, because clear communication and articulating how you feel, or even what you want to convey to someone else to maybe make them feel better. So all these different dynamics play a part. So the effective communication, then you can connect to the heart of the situation or the matter. And then if there is a conversion type of experience, or convert in the sense, meaning we're on the same page, that would be what it is, versus trying to persuade anybody. It's that we're communicating, we've made a connection, and now we're communing. So I could take out the convert and just say, now we're communing at this point.
Absolutely. And that comes from all the conversation skills that you've built. It comes from, you know, asking proper questions, listening to the answer, formulating a response based on what their answers are. It really comes from, like, you being understood, you know, having them understand your position, starts with understanding their position first, because then you can position your proposal, whatever, to address exactly what their needs are at the time.
Right. And that's how it is in family and relationships. With the same, you know, those same, they're not even soft skills at this point. They're lightning skills, in a sense, that that need to come in. And the reason for that is because they are critical. Yes, they are soft, but the evolution of it kind of brings it to, you have to understand that this is of high importance, and it keeps evolving, it keeps expanding, in terms of you just can't leave things the way they are. We opened up this conversation in terms of talking about change and knowing that that is constant. That is one of those things that is going to continue change and transition for sure. And so just because something starts out a certain way doesn't mean we can just leave it, because I know there's the saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But sometimes if we don't realize that if you don't actually evolve it, it will break. It may not,
or it's broken and you're just not
and
aware
you're
enough
not
to know
aware of
that
it.
it's
Exactly
broken.
right. You're not
I
aware
see
of
that
it.
a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and this is such a critical time to have these discussions, because
definitely.
we have seen over the last 2.5, 3 years, with the isolation and communities breaking down and the polarization of people, the relationships have shattered in a lot of cases. And the ones that haven't shattered have changed so dramatically that people don't really know how to show up in those relationships. So it's never been more critical than it is now. And also it's in these times of enormous change that we need our relationships, we need our communities more than ever before, and yet they're in a real state of disarray.
Well, yeah, and what it is, I want to speak to that and play the devil's advocate just a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, and before we get ready to close out here. I do teaching around communications metamorphosis, and I know you've been familiar with some of my teachings of the speaking and writing, dynamics as it relates to the metamorphosis process. But within the communication factor on this end, is that you brought up the last, so many years and what has happened, but we've been in a transition of metamorphosis. So the old frameworks of how things were, even in their greatest structures or so, have needed to break down and to go through the metamorphosis so that they can reform anew. So we look at, like, you think about the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. What seems like the end of the world to the caterpillar is because it's becoming a butterfly. It's becoming a new entity, a new creation, something far more greater and better. Because what happens, going back to what I said earlier, is that even with all the relationship books and help and all these different things, relationships are still not really expanding and improving in the ways that are going to be most effective moving forward, meaning that was sustainable for the older world and the older trajectory of relationships. But now communities and just what you were talking about, it's going through a transformation into an evolution so that it can become new, not new and improved, a new creation in terms of how we show up. And so relationships have that too, which I actually in one of my courses teach on the relationship metamorphosis factor too, is that relationships do have breakdowns at times when they're becoming something new. But then we do know that there are some that just need to shed away.
That's what I was going to say, is that
it needs to just go,
part of this rebuilding of community doesn't mean you're trying to hog tie that old community back together at all costs.
Or preserve the old, right?
Yeah, it means, but it does mean leaving that community or leaving those relationships with a level of peace.
Absolutely.
Not with bitterness, because you're dragging that then into any new relationships and new communities that you're creating. So getting to a level where you've dealt with all the baggage, you're not dragging it along, you're at peace with the relationships that have moved out of your life. You've done that on a very peaceful level. And now you're prepared to start looking at who am I? Who do I want to be in the world, and who aligns with that? Absolutely. And building those relationships.
Right. And allowing yourself, which we can talk about this for days and probably
I know.
definitely can come back
and we do sometimes.
Yeah, and have a conversation around this, is that, the metamorphosis of self, again, is what improves. I don't even like to use the term improve when it's a new creation, but it does evolve and enhance other relationship dynamics. And so, which the communications, everything, it changes everything because it's a new creation. And that's really, in terms of relationships, where we have to focus the energy on, especially during these times. So I know that we just have like a few minutes left, here, and I can't tell you how amazing this has been to have this conversation with you in this format. And we certainly have to do it again. And I do want to mention that I'm going to have your information within the description and the relationship courses and things that you mentioned.
Perfect.
We'll have
Yeah.
all of that within the description, because this has been phenomenal. And before we close out, is there anything that you would love to share as a sense of empowerment or resolve for people, or anything, a call to action that you would like to?
I think just, we've got some really basic level courses that just introduce people to some of the conversation traps that are out there. We help develop those skills using card games to train the brain for those habits. It's fun, it's fast, it's really effective. And it's just such a great way to start building that foundation and moving forward. So the one course is Conversation Mastery Formula, and the second one is Ultimate Emotional Mastery. And I'll put both those links in, or give them to you so you can put them in the
description.
There. And it's just a great way to start moving in the right direction, building those skills, building the awareness, and having fun
expanding it. Yeah.
So yeah,
and
that's what I'd say.
So what is your, if you had one empowerment statement or just something that you would love for people to think about at this point, whether it's based on what we've talked about today or just something you would like to leave them with for moving forward, what would that be?
I think that the most important thing for people to realize right now is they own the power to create anything that they want in their life. And there's resources. They don't have to do it alone. There's resources out there, but it's as we started out the show, building that relationship with yourself so that you know what your gifts are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what you want to be in the world, what you are, who you want to be and who you are being, and making sure that those two things are aligning. And that's the foundation that you can take out into the world to build really powerful, dynamic relationships in every realm.
Absolutely. That was so well stated. That right there is a show within itself, right? And, and we certainly will have to come back and talk about that as well. So many different topics. That's why I love leaving the space open for the conversation to evolve and expand, and then set up for a new conversation, the next level conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
great.
It will grow and change. We will never hit the end of this road.
No.
Grow and change and evolve, and new aspects come in. Just new intriguing elements that will come in on the road ahead.
That's right. That's right.
I'm looking forward to it.
I am as well. Well, Queen Brenda Lynn, I thank you so much for being here with me today and having this very empowering conversation of unmasking some relationship dynamics and helping individuals take their relationship with self and other relationships to the next level. This has been nothing short of phenomenal, and I certainly look forward to having you back again.
I look forward to joining you again, and thank you for opening the space up for me to join you today.
Oh, you are most welcome. You are most welcome.
Such a great journey to be on.
Yes, it is, and I'm glad we're on it together. Thank you. So I just want to close out by re-emphasizing the importance of the communications factor that we've been talking about today during this segment, and for you to go back and actually re-listen to this a couple of times and pull out those nuggets that really stood out to you. And sometimes, take small steps. You don't have to try everything, but try one thing first and then see how that goes for you and continue to build upon that. But make it a top priority to level up your communications factor for the relationship. And as mentioned, there's information about Brenda Lynn within the description and what she has and can provide for you. So with that, I'm glad we've unmasked some relationship dynamics today, sending everyone away with many blessings. And until next time, continue to take what you do to the next level. Stay blessed.